Good News Radio with Paul Harrell.
To the program, we've got Congressman Rick Crawford on the line. Rick, good to have you back on, sir.
Hey, Paul, I was enjoying that bumper music there.
Yeah, I know. Sorry we cut it short. I wanted to get to the interview, but yeah, we'll got some more coming up here in just a minute, though. So tell us, where are you right now? Are you back in Arkansas? Are you in D.C.? What's going on with you?
We are in D.C. Right now and still in session, wrapping up the week.
Okay, so how are things? Like, what's going on right now?
Well, you may have seen the news on this. We voted on a balanced budget amendment. As you know, I've talked to you about this many times. I've worked hard to try and get a balanced budget amendment to the floor. I make this an issue every year, and this is the second time in the almost 8 years that I've been here that I've been given the opportunity to vote on a balanced budget amendment, and yet we still had 6 Republicans who voted no. So I'm trying to figure that one out. We had 3 Democrats that voted yes, but ultimately we had 233 votes. You need 287 to send it over to the Senate, so we fell short over here.
Wow. Well, yeah, that's unfortunate. And right now it seems like there's if you read the media reports, I mean, the media, the liberal media, they're out there saying, hey, Republicans are worried and they're scared and about the midterms and things like that. And then you hear, if you go to the liberal, really the ones that are openly liberal, it's like a blue wave is coming and that sort of thing. And so you talk a little bit about that. I mean, what are your thoughts on the potential of a blue wave?
Well, I tell you what, the punditry has got it wrong consistently. They were decidedly wrong on President Trump. There must have been 90+% of the media that projected him. Not just, we think he's, going to lose, but, we're projecting Hillary as the winner. I mean, they were doing everything in the world they could to, line up for a coronation, and they were all wrong. And their polling underlying their projections was wrong. And they haven't learned from anything. They haven't learned, their polling methodology was flawed, and they haven't learned, really what drove people to vote for Donald Trump in the first place. And I think that sentiment still exists widely across the country, and that you really want to see Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, because she's not doing her team any favors by continually going out there and, talking about the crumbs of tax reform and things of that nature. And she had the temerity to talk about, to quote Martin Luther King, I think it was yesterday or the day before, talking about, when there are people in abject poverty, there shouldn't be people with, opulent wealth, paraphrasing. And she is one of those that is opulently wealthy. I mean, it boggles the mind that she can stand there straight-faced and say some of the things that she says and expect people are going to connect with that and believe it. She comes from a very wealthy family. She's one of the richest members of Congress, and yet she's going to try and pretend as though somehow she's got a connection to the poor, downtrodden people of America who are barely getting by, and then at the same time calling their tax reform bonus, crumbs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a huge disconnect there. The left is lurching further. I mean, the Democrats in Washington are lurching further and further to the left. And as long as they have Nancy Pelosi as their poster child, I don't think they can expect the blue wave that they're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would agree with that. I'm just hoping that. To me, let me just say this: there is not a positive word that the press can say about President Donald Trump, and without even getting into the Russia situation and their constant obsession with that. But it seems to me that if you really kind of take a long view of this over the first year of his presidency into now, there's a lot of traps and nets that I feel like that the media and the left, they fall into their own nets. They fall into their own traps for this guy. I mean, right now we're looking at an amazing situation that happened last week. Saudi Arabia recognized Israel's right to exist. And you look at the Korean Peninsula potentially being denuclearized.
think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate it. It's good to be back. I was out yesterday, took a personal day, and I'm glad to be back. I appreciate all of the outpouring of concern. Also, I appreciate, Joe, did you see some of the comments in the Facebook feed for the Best Of program that was playing yesterday? We have some very dedicated listeners who were upset that we were not on, and I apologize to you guys, but here we are. We're back and we're up and fresh, live, going again. We have a new whiteboard for the week. It reads, "Deliberate lack of account." We will talk more about that coming up at 7:33 when we will be talking with Mr. Josh Waters, who has been in the trial in the courtroom of John Woods, feverishly taking notes. It's been a few days of actual court proceedings since we've spoken with him, and so he's got a lot to catch this audience, catch me up to speed on, and so he will be on. And that interview may go long. We've already planned for it because he's got so much information to cover. So you certainly want to stay tuned in the program and listen to what Josh Waters has to say on this John Woods update. 30 minutes before that, at 7 o'clock, top of next hour, we are going to be talking to the president and CEO of Empower Texans. His name is Michael Quinn Sullivan. And you guys, it's a real treat. Empower Texas is this great organization in Texas that is trying to really look out for the taxpayer of the state of Texas by making sure government doesn't grow. We'll tell you all about them and Mr. Michael Quinn Sullivan when we interview him coming up at 7:05. In the meantime, let me just say this. Last week, we reported that on Facebook, Senator Jason Rapert decided to defend Governor Asa Hutchinson. And by defending Governor Asa Hutchinson, he decided to attack Republican gubernatorial candidate Jan Morgan by calling her a liar. So, that was last week. So, naturally, if you called her a liar last week, it makes perfect sense. It is a perfectly natural progression for Senator Jason Rapert to go back on Facebook and now call her the spirit of Jezebel. Yes, exactly. I know, right? It's perfect. It's a very logical progression. Senator Jason Rapert, this is what he had to say about Jan Morgan. Morgan has beguiled many of you just like Jezebel did when attacking Elijah. It's sad. She's lying and misrepresenting facts, and some of you are buying it. I don't bend for anybody, sir, and I won't play dumb while this lady attacks a good man. If you aren't listening to people who actually know Asa, then you aren't listening for truth. Okay, so you have to know Asa in order to understand his record. Got it. That makes sense. He goes on. Asa, the very idea that you so quickly say you would second-guess someone like me, who you have supported, now that this new spirit has entered the room, ought to make you step back and think things over. She's full of hot air. That's it. Now, that last part of Jason Rapert's statement there kind of calls for a little bit more context. So where did this particular post originate? Well, if you go over to this next post, I found it. This is where it originated. Joe, if you can go to the next post. So there's a guy named Glenn on Facebook who said this to Senator Rapert. Said, Senator Rapert, so love you, but I think your polls come from the same folks that had Trump losing, and I'm almost certain Asa will be in the exact same boat as Hillary very soon. He went on, I can't fathom how someone with your values and background could support Governor Hutchinson. It really makes me second-guess my support for you. A lot of the folks, and every single one I've spoken to about the election, and of course it cuts off there. This is a screenshot, and so it doesn't go any further. And that is what, go back to the original post, that is what made Senator Jason Rapert post this. So it's interesting. What he is saying is that because some people are now turning, some supporters of Senator Jason Rapert are now second-guessing their support for Senator Jason Rapert because of his attacks against Jan Morgan. And this has been kind of boiling for a week, by the way. And this post is exploding. Matter of fact, this post is exploding. It's hard for us to even navigate this particular Facebook post without the computer kind of freezing up or lagging really bad. With what we're showing you. And you can, by the way, watch this and see everything, see these graphics for yourself live if you go to Conduit, or Facebook.com/Conduit News, rather. So this is what Jan Morgan had to say. Let's scroll up and let's listen to what the Republican gubernatorial candidate Jan Morgan had to say. She writes, ladies, according to this Arkansas senator, my opponent's wingman, your professional success is based on how you look. You know, the governor's water boys have hit desperate times when the Christian senator, a pastor, calls me Jezebel and a spirit putting a spell on Arkansas men who support me. I have never attacked this senator on social media, in person, or in any forum, public or private. His attack on me is based on his relationship with my opponent in this race. It's unconscionable that a pastor would resort to this kind of baseless personal attack. I served 2 terms on the executive board of the Arkansas State Baptist Convention, on senior staff of a church for several years, and co-hosted a TV show with Governor Mike Huckabee on the first Christian TV network in Arkansas. Why don't you just step out there and call me Satan incarnate, Jason Rapert? By the way, your implication that men in Arkansas support me based on my appearance is insulting to all educated men in this state who support me because of my fiscal and constitutional conservative policy platform. In addition, your remarks are sexist and insulting to all women in Arkansas who are victimized by men like you who accuse them of professional success based on their physical attributes. I'm sure professional women in Arkansas and men who support me will not forget your outrageous comments on Election Day. Between this and Asa's support for the Babe Bracket, a contest based on the appearance between TV anchor women, Arkansans now have a better insight into how women are viewed by the Asa team. Interesting. This is it's all night. I mean, my phone was going off all night. People sending me this. Did you see what happened? Did you see what he said? The spirit of Jezebel. Now, listen. This is the kind I was telling Joe right before we came on. Now, this is the kind of stuff that is really frustrating when you make these kind of comments, and a lot of people have we're going to read some of the comments here in a minute, but when you inject, I don't know, I guess some people might call it an attempt to Bible juke someone, you know, that you know what I'm saying? You know what a juke is, kind of in athletics, and using the Bible to do it. But here it's not even factual, because last I checked, I talked with Jan Morgan the other day. I didn't ask her if she's murdered any prophets lately, but maybe, you know what I'm saying? She hasn't murdered any prophets. And so, I mean, this is just, it's ridiculous. It really is. Just on its factual level, not to mention what it does to people who maybe are out there searching, or out there, this to me is in many ways is why people who do not subscribe to the Christian faith, because see, this is what gets broadcast. I was kind of hoping, my first thought when I saw this was, is there anybody who has a close enough relationship with Senator Rapert to say you need to stop doing things like this? You know, is there anybody that's got a close enough relationship with him, maybe in his church or something, that can say, hey, maybe you don't need to compare Republican gubernatorial candidates to Jezebel? And it's clearly, you know, I mean, It clearly is about the gender here as well, by the way. I mean, because you wouldn't say that Asa has a spirit of Jezebel because Asa is a man. It clearly is Jan Morgan's gender here, her being a woman, that is of issue as well. So anyway, and again, she hasn't lied on the campaign trail. She sticks to the facts, and Asa's record, it is what it is, and people. Asa's record speaks for itself, and so you're bringing that up. But this is gonna actually, in my opinion, this is gonna get if I know I followed Senator Jason Rapert on social media for a long time. I don't always talk about him, but if I know him, his pattern is to double down. So we will see. And by the way, there was a Talk Business and Hendricks College poll that had Jan Morgan with 30% of the vote against Asa's 57%, I think. And so I'm gonna break that down later in the week. But because we're talking about Jan Morgan right now, okay, I wanted to take this opportunity to do a little flashback and to bring you up to speed as to who Jan Morgan is as far as her record goes, because I found a contradiction, or not a contradiction with Jan Morgan, excuse me, but I found a stark contrast, rather, between Asa Hutchinson and Jan Morgan, aside from what the issues of this campaign are. And I had to go back to do it. There is a documentary called Rampant Injustice that Jan Morgan made as an investigative journalist. It had to do with the Arkansas Mountain Pure water bottling plant that is down in central Arkansas. And they were raided by Attorney General Eric Holder's Justice Department with paramilitary Gestapo-like tactics. They detained an entire building over what was an alleged white-collar crime. And I think a lot of these people, whether it was the Gibson Guitar people, they had this done. Remember, Gibson Guitar, you're getting your wood from the wrong place or whatever. And a lot of these people ended up paying the government because it was a shakedown, and it was an attack on small business and everything else. And so, Jan Morgan, we're gonna show you Rampant Injustice today on the program. In this hour, we're going to show you this documentary. We're going to take a break here in just a minute, but I wanted to contrast this. While Jan Morgan was doing investigative journalism on behalf of Arkansas small business owners, exposing the paramilitary Gestapo tactics of Eric Holder, who is one of the most, if not the most controversial attorney generals we have had ever in this country, set race relations back in this country 30 years. And Eric Holder's the one that did that, by the way. Barack Obama helped him, but Eric Holder and Barack Obama set race relations in this country back 30 years from where they were. And we see this now because most people are focused, especially in the left, on the differences and everything else. While Jan Morgan was exposing Asa Hutchinson. Before that, while Jan Morgan was exposing Eric Holder, what was Asa Hutchinson doing? Here's a flashback article for you. December 22nd, thehill.com, December 22nd, 2008. Clinton critic Hutchinson backs Eric Holder for Attorney General. Former Representative Asa Hutchinson, Republican Arkansas, joined a host of others, including some Republicans, in backing Eric Holder for Attorney General Monday. In a letter, Hutchinson wrote that Holder, as Deputy Attorney General in the Clinton administration in the late 1990s, had supported an expansion of the independent counsel investigation into the president. Boy, does that all sound familiar? His decision demonstrates that Mr. Holder can make the tough call even when it goes against the administration in which he serves. Of course, this was completely ridiculous when it comes to the Obama administration, Fast and Furious, all this other stuff. Eric Holder was a disaster when it comes to being impartial and looking at the law as through an impartial lens. So that is what. Oh no! Listen to this last paragraph again from 2008. Hutchinson and a slew of civil rights and law enforcement groups on Monday expressed support for Holder's nomination to become Attorney General in the Obama administration. Hutchinson, a former U.S. attorney, joined another former top GOP lawyer, ex-Deputy Attorney General James Comey, and backing Eric Holder. So we have James Comey in 2008, the famous James Comey who leaked classified intelligence in order to start the Russia investigation in the first place. James Comey and Asa Hutchinson backed Eric Holder, and we're still trying to unravel just how corrupt. I mean, we're talking about the Justice Department. Yeah, it was Loretta Lynch on the tarmac, but if you don't think Loretta Lynch was just continuing what Eric Holder was doing in the first place, and so, folks, when we have joked before, or no, we've actually not joked about it. We've just asked the question, hey, Asa spent a lot of time in D.C. We know that there is a deep state. We know that there is this underlying force that's trying to undo any of the swamp draining that Trump is trying to do. Is Asa Hutchinson a part of that? Well, this article's not doing him any favors, let me tell you right now. We're going to be back. I want to contrast, again, Eric Holder and Asa Hutchinson, his endorsement of Eric Holder, versus what Jan Morgan was doing, which was exposing the Gestapo paramilitary tactics of Eric Holder's Justice Department on Arkansas business, and I'll show it to you. Go to facebook.com/Conduit News. I'll show it to you here in just a moment. Who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The Zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the Zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Okay, fine, whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP Parody. Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So, Jan Morgan's been a lot of things, but before she was running for governor, she was an investigative journalist. And again, back in 2008, we were just contrasting Asa Hutchinson's endorsement of Eric Holder for Attorney General, looking at a Hill.com article. You know, the Hill has been instrumental in reporting on a lot of what's been going on with the Justice Department corruption, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, all of these things that are happening around James Comey. And listen to this last paragraph about the endorsement. Asa Hutchinson and a slew of civil rights and law enforcement groups on Monday expressed support for Holder. This is back in 2008. To become Attorney General in the Obama administration. Hutchinson, a former U.S. attorney, joined another former top GOP lawyer, ex-Deputy Attorney General James Comey, in backing Eric Holder. There you go. This is very, very interesting. Once again, I just want to make this note. We have the media always loves to do this. They love to take Republicans and use them as support, big government Republicans, and use them as a prop. And Asa is used even today. He goes on MSNBC and CNN and is used as a prop to criticize the president when he was trying to repeal Obamacare. And, of course, this same old playbook here back in 2008. So contrast that versus what did Jan Morgan do once Eric Holder got into office? Jan Morgan did investigative pieces standing up for Arkansas small business, and she did this one entitled Rampant Injustice about a water bottling plant right here in Arkansas that was raided by paramilitary Gestapo tactics of the Eric Holder Justice Department. Listen to this.
Surrounded by federal agents, a loaded gun pointed at his head. Those moments of Court Stack's life replay in his nightmares.
I was wondering, why would someone point a loaded gun at my face? I mean, what does this have to do with anything? It's open the door and point a loaded gun at someone's face who's in an office in a management position. It made me feel really scared, kind of helpless.
It was his first and only encounter with law enforcement. He will never forget it. Neither will the other employees at this small Arkansas water bottling company. Their vivid accounts of that day were used to produce an accurate reenactment of the federal raid on Mountain Pure Water Company.
We saw all of the cop cars and the commotion, and nobody could come in.
They come in with black vehicles, unmarked, blocked every entrance. There was probably 40 to 50 agents, blocked every door. They just come in full speed.
They had surrounded the facility and entered all the doors and secured the whole premises when they came in.
Yes, I was scared to move because, they had guns on and you couldn't really move. You couldn't go nowhere.
First of all, it was ridiculous. I mean, there was nobody here that needed manned with firearms or to be guarded.
Well, it was almost like you'd watch Cops or something, or watch these drug raid shows where they would kind of come through the door, just everybody storms in and just kind of pushing everybody to the side.
And there's police everywhere with guns, and it just blew me away. I didn't know what was going on, I thought maybe it was drugs or they was after a felon or something, but I mean, they had a lot of police.
I felt violated. I felt the company was violated. Everyone here, we were all in shock.
And they came through the door and they pushed us over to the wall and went down through the hallway. They were very serious. They were very well intending to take control of the facility and to intimidate us in the sense of complying with them.
We were saying, oh my gosh, what's going on? And but as far as being able to really say something to each other, we couldn't. We had them all on top of us, no matter what. I mean, they were everywhere. They were everywhere.
At first, everybody thought it was.
All right, we're going to have more of this story. This is Conduit News Radio. We are highlighting this story, doing a flashback here of this report and what happened to this Arkansas small business back in the Obama administration with the Eric Holder Justice Department. We've got to take a break, but when we come back, the rest of this story and really just providing some context here versus, what people's past records were, before maybe they were trying to convince the population who's the most conservative. You have a record. And not to mention we have Asa Hutchinson's record as governor as well, and that's something important to look at. We got to take a break. Back in a moment. if Kim Jong-un and the meeting actually takes place. I mean, there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of positive, and then there's some potential positive things, and I think President Trump is an integral part of that right now.
No, I think that's true, and I think that you would think after almost a year and a half in, as he's been president now for almost a year and a half, he's proven them wrong at every turn. I mean, I don't always agree with necessarily the tone or the type of rhetoric that the president puts out there. But one of the things that I've had to come to terms with, and I had to do this with Obama, you've got to look past the personality and look at the policy, and the numbers don't lie. I mean, our economic trajectory has improved tremendously. Opportunities for people across the economic spectrum are much, much better. I mean, historically better. And so, I know it's easy to focus in on someone with a big personality, and be honest about it, a big ego. It's easy to get focused in on all of that. And that's one of the things that I've had to condition myself to is to look beyond that and focus in on the policy and the numbers. And you'll see that there is an awful lot to be excited about that has transpired over the last year and a half or so, and that's directly attributable to this president. Mm-hmm. At the same time, President Obama, maybe one of the most charismatic individuals to occupy the White House, certainly in my lifetime, was a great speaker, very eloquent, and I met him 2 or 3 times, and he's very, very friendly. But his policies were the worst thing in the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were terrible. There was very seldom anything we agreed on. And so, again, you have to get past the personal, presentation and focus in on the policy. And if you can do that, you can make a better judgment about whether you support this policy or that policy.
Yeah.
Take away the personalities and focus in on the policy.
Yeah, it's it's what you do, for sure. Actions are bigger than words. And let me we're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. I mean, you said he proves them wrong time and again. I mean, think about when he came out and he said, I found out that I was wiretapped, and the media freaks out and everything else. And and then, of course, you being on the Intel Committee, and you guys are voting to release that memo, and we now know, we know that was true, I mean, and is there any more fallout from that, by the way? I haven't really heard anything else to come from, that memo, but that memo was very revealing.
Well, that's why you haven't heard anything more about it, because it was accurate, and then of course the Democrat response to it was inaccurate and full of pejorative and personal attacks that really just were sort of a knee-jerk reaction to the factual presentation we made in that.
All right, here we go, folks. We got a lot more to get to this entire broadcast, this entire show. So what we're doing here, just to bring you up to speed, is that we are highlighting back in the Obama administration, there was a Gestapo paramilitary raid on basically for an alleged white-collar crime. And the Eric Holder Justice Department, did this not just to Arkansas businesses, but they did this, I think it was the Tennessee, the Gibson guitar, was that in Tennessee? And they were going, and they basically, I mean, they come in with guns blazing, these federal agents, and this, of course, we're contrasting what Jan Morgan did in making a documentary, exposing all of this, compared to, Asa Hutchinson actually endorsed Eric Holder to be Attorney General. Did you know that? A lot of people don't even know that. You know who else endorsed Eric Holder to be Attorney General? And they're mentioned, Asa's name is mentioned in the same Hill article from 2008. James Comey. Boy, don't we know a lot more about James Comey than we ever thought we would, right? So here it is, Rampant Injustice, this documentary by investigative journalist, now gubernatorial candidate Republican Jan Morgan, picking back up where we left off. Go.
For so many people, or, so many cops.
But this was no drug raid, no violent criminals hiding inside the walls of this facility. In fact, employees here were shocked when they discovered the real reason behind the terrifying paramilitary Gestapo-style raid. This raid was about securing paperwork concerning financial transactions of the company's owner, John Stacks. Paperwork they would have gladly shared at the request of a single agent. No need for an aggressive raid by 40 to 50 armed agents.
Well, in my opinion, the raid itself was totally unnecessary. The government has subpoena power with the grand jury. They could have subpoenaed anything they wanted to, and I've known John Stacks for a long time. John would have given them whatever they subpoenaed. There was simply no need to bring 40 or 50 officers out here and storm this place like they did.
I don't think that we have anybody in our facility that, with our background checks, that have any kind of active criminal background. And yet, you've got a tactical team that entered our facility and treated every one of our employees as though they were involved in criminal activity. And that was pretty amazing to me. You know, the same information that was gleaned, if they would have walked in the front door, they could have had. No reason to think that there would have been any issues or any opposition to that, and surely not from our employees working on the floor.
John Stacks, the company's owner, was not at the plant when the raid started. He and his other son, Ryan, an attorney, were shocked to discover upon arrival that Stacks could not even enter his own facility, nor provide his employees with a company attorney. He says one agent even threatened to arrest him for obstruction of justice.
They told us to sit down. They told us to shut up. They told us that they would deal with us in their own time, and told us again we needed to leave or they would arrest us for obstruction of justice. And, you know, I told them this was my place of business. I was the owner, and I thought I had a right to know what was going on.
My father had asked to go in, and they said no, he could not. And I'd asked to go in, they said no. And I said, well, as an attorney and representing Mountain Pure, I would like to be present in what searches or things you're conducting. And they said no. And we found out they were conducting interviews, and I said, well, I'd like to sit in on those. We were also told no.
And what I'm going to say is a direct quote. We're the federal government. We can do what we want, when we want, and there's nothing you can do about it. I was blessed to have a father that fought against Nazis in World War II. It's my generation's turn to fight. The problem is, it's on this country we got to fight. I'm not a militant. They've thrown the Constitution away. We did not have lawyers. I requested that a lawyer the corporate attorney be contacted. That was thrown out the window. My wife saw this on TV. I could tell by my ringtone she was calling. I could hear my phone ring. I'm not allowed to answer it. Am I arrested? Am I detained? No one would tell us anything. Don't worry about it, just sit down. They threw our liberties out the window. They treated us like third-class citizens. If people are not outraged, they need to be. This used to be America. Now it's not.
The language they used, the profanity they used over and over again, screaming and hollering at me, calling me and referring to me as Old Man Stacks. And then one of the law officers there told me kept telling me, well, why don't you just touch me, Old Man Stacks? I'll show you what a federal officer can do to you. And did everything he could to provoke me, and literally hovering over me and literally spitting in my face as he was hollering and screaming at me.
I remember thinking, to me, it was almost like something you would see in a fictional movie. I couldn't believe what was occurring. To an extent, I felt like I was in a third world country, the way they were treating us.
Meanwhile, inside the building, agents shut down plant operations. The assembly line came to a screeching halt. All employees were herded to one room, their cell phones confiscated, as well as pocket knives or other items that could be perceived as weapons.
They disconnected all the phones, they disconnected the internet, and we was just left waiting. It was embarrassing to see them just bust the door with no one knowing what was going on. And then they acted like the employees were just a bunch of drug dealers.
Again, I would have never fathomed that something to this extent could take place, you know, in the United States. And it was one of the wildest things, the craziest things that I've ever been a part of. We were being treated similarly to what you would with some type of terrorist, essentially. They pretty much told us under these circumstances we really didn't have any rights at the time, and it was. I don't really know that I can put words to the feeling, to what I was feeling, other than just disbelief.
What agents did next further compounded that disbelief. They seized computers, laptops, employees' personal items, flash drives, and financial records. 82 boxes of materials.
There were two legal problems with the raid. First, I think the warrant for the raid was invalid. The Fourth Amendment requires that the items to be seized in a search be described with particularity in the warrant. This warrant, in describing the items to be seized, referenced the attachment. The attachment says that the officers can seize all evidence relevant to a violation of the statutes listed on the warrant. There were no statutes listed on the warrant. So they were either authorized to seize nothing or to seize anything they wanted to, and they seized anything they wanted to. So in my opinion, the warrant was invalid. The other was, officers are authorized by law to detain folks in the area to be searched long enough to assure the officer's safety. I think they greatly exceeded the amount of time necessary to ensure their safety, because they detained folks for several hours here. Wouldn't let them leave, wouldn't let them call a lawyer, and I think that was illegal.
8 months has passed since the raid. Mountain Pure Company officials say 85% of the seized items have not been returned. Employees who spent most of the day and evening with agents also made another discovery about the raid and the agents involved.
I tried to visit with a few of the agents and overheard a few of the agents talking, and it came to my attention that a majority of the approximately 50 agents had came from out of town, East Coast, West Coast, all over the U.S. That was really troublesome in that we already have a lot of issues with our government spending and trying to stay within budget, and you take 30 plus agents and you fly them in from all over the country and you put them up for a night and you feed them, or maybe 2 nights it was. What is the expense of that?
News agencies flooded to the small company, and as news accounts of this big raid hit the airwaves, Stax was flooded with phone calls from business owners around the country. They shared horror stories about their own businesses subjected to armed, aggressive, intimidating raids by the Justice Department and the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. Stories that sounded eerily familiar. Duncan Outdoors was one of those businesses.
I just kept saying, what have we done? Are we being arrested? And I did ask, I said, do we need to call an attorney? And the one guy looked at me and said, you can call an attorney, but it won't do any good. We're the IRS. We can do anything we want.
So the tactics are definitely Gestapo-type tactics that should not be happening in the United States of America. It's similar to what you might see in a SWAT raid on a drug house. And that's what a lot of people thought when they saw this.
The CEO of Gibson Guitar can certainly relate. His business was raided twice. The raid tactics sounding awfully familiar.
It was very much like a drug raid or, terrorist raid, actually. The agents or officers, whatever they were not friendly. They were armed, they were hostile, they were intimidating. But to have it done twice and not having been charged with anything is really bizarre. We incurred losses, we incurred military-style action, we had seizures, our workplace was closed, and we had threats that they would close us, period, and yet we hadn't been charged with a single thing.
The raids cost Gibson Guitar Company well over $5 million in goods seized, work stoppage, and legal expenses, all without having to prove to any judicial body that anyone with the company was guilty of anything. And in the case of the Duncans, who had also not been charged with a crime, the government even seized money from their bank accounts without telling them.
If the federal government could come in before you're convicted of any crime and take hundreds of thousands of dollars out of your bank account, shut down your business, tell your employees what to do, keep you from your family, I mean, at what point is it so overkill that no reasonable person would be able to respond rationally, reasonably, defend themselves? I mean, nobody could do that. I mean, to me, it just seems like if you can walk into the bank and I don't even know about it and wipe out my bank account, where does it stop?
It's no secret that IRS audits of small businesses have soared under the Obama administration. The tax division of Eric Holder's Justice Department, which supervises all criminal proceedings under Internal Revenue laws, has been very busy. Various articles on the net refer to it as small business bullying, citing a 32% increase in the number of audits of small to medium-sized businesses between 2009 and 2011, since Eric Holder took over the Justice Department. An increasing number of these businesses being audited report being subjected to paramilitary aggressive raids.
Well, I think over the course of several years what we've seen is an increase in a really a paramilitary style raid that's going on small businesses. We've seen that increase for so long, and when I say a paramilitary raid, I really mean it is a paramilitary raid. It's a specific tactic that is a military tactic. It's a shock and awe. It's designed to create confusion, instability, disruption, and then to take advantage of that confusion, that instability, and disruption. But when you have small business owners with impeccable backgrounds that enjoy outstanding reputations in their community, that have never been in trouble in their whole life, and then when the offense does not imply any sort of dangerousness or violence, the paramilitary style raid is over the top.
We talked with a number of businesses in various states around the country. All of them tell the same story. Some of them were too afraid to speak with us on camera, and many so fearful of government retaliation, they asked us not to use their names or the names of their businesses. And while many of these government investigations and raids led to charges related to white-collar crimes, the guilt or innocence of the business executives involved is not the issue. At issue is the Gestapo paramilitary tactics being utilized by the government in these raids, tactics that are in clear violation of the constitutional rights of American citizens.
Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution guarantees, in fact it says, the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended. So every American fundamentally has the right not to be detained, and this is important, anywhere, not just in prison, has a right not to be detained anywhere. So that is an enormous concern, because the stories we're hearing, apparently that is happening. And that doesn't even go into the Miranda requirements of being read your personal rights and being afforded the opportunity to have an attorney, which we're also being told as being abridged. The two pillars of freedom and liberty in the country are the rights to property and the rights to privacy. So when those are abridged or they're somehow injured, then there's an enormous constitutional concern on the most fundamental guarantees of liberty and freedom as an American citizen.
Curtis Coleman, chairman of the Institute on Constitutional Policy, says Congress has an obligation to call for a House investigation, and that states need to reclaim state sovereignty to defend their citizens from federal abuse of power.
One of the solutions to these kind of issues is for states to begin to, instead of representing the federal government to their citizens, to start representing the citizens to their federal government. The states are going to have to start pushing back and start recovering the balance of power intended by the Constitution. And they're going to have to start recovering their constitutionally intended sovereignty. And this is one of the areas in which the state can function. If there are repeated reports of increasing frequency that the rights, the fundamental rights of privacy and property and writs of habeas corpus are being infringed, then the Congress has a constitutional obligation to performance oversight, to investigate the incidences, to determine if there's a pattern.
Some business owners are committed to pushing for that legislative action.
The issue is there is absolutely no consequence for bad government action. So the executive branch now has king-like, emperor-like authority that circumvents constitutional balance that were foreseen by our forefathers. And because it's taken 100+ years to get here, it's going to be really hard to sort of get back to that sense of balance. But I am committed to working towards that end and spending years doing it.
Getting the legislative branch to call a House investigation to rein in the executive branch of government may help Americans regain some lost rights. But Gary Duncan, a former Green Beret who served his country over 2 decades, fears some things lost may never be recovered.
I think that as a result of the raid, a lot of people's opinion of my integrity would be damaged. And that bothers me a lot. My credibility will be damaged forever. You know, when something that negative and that powerful is done to you and you have nothing that you can do.
So, welcome back. Let's go ahead and get to the live shot here. So that was a video. It was a documentary done by Rampant Injustice, investigative journalist Jan Morgan at the time. That's the voice that you heard there. And it had to do with the Gestapo tactics, paramilitary tactics on these, these small businesses for alleged crimes, and a lot of the businesses ended up just, trying to make things go away. But you saw that, and so what reason we were doing that, man. I guess the perspective that I have, it's so crazy. You look at Asa Hutchinson's endorsement of Eric Holder as Attorney General in 2008. Fast forward to 2012, where Jan Morgan is standing up for Arkansas small businesses and even small businesses across the country, trying to expose this, trying to stand up for constitutional principles. And you really have a stark contrast there, don't you? You have a stark contrast. One more time before we go to break. TheHill.com in 2008 with the headline about Governor Asa Hutchinson. Clinton critic Hutchinson backs Eric Holder for AG. In 2008, former Representative Asa Hutchinson joined a host of others, including some Republicans, in backing Eric Holder. In a letter, Hutchinson wrote that Holder, as Deputy Attorney General in the Clinton administration, had supported an expansion of the independent counsel investigation into the president. Hutchinson and a slew of civil rights and law enforcement groups on Monday expressed support for Holder's nomination to become Attorney General in the Obama administration. Hutchinson, a former U.S. attorney, joined another former top GOP lawyer, ex-Deputy Attorney General James Comey, in backing Eric Holder for Attorney General. What a contrast. What a contrast. And what does Senator Jason Rapert again say now? Senator Rapert has now come out on Facebook and has called Jan Morgan Jezebel, says she has the spirit of Jezebel and is deceiving his supporters and is supporting her instead of supporting Asa Hutchinson. You can't make this stuff up, but look at the record. Look at the record. Oh, and what I would just say is, again, well, I've been a Republican for a long time. That's their only answer. Well, Asa's been a Republican for a long time. Huh. Okay. Well, see, even if you go further back, it's funny. It's like, well, he has to go all the way back to Ronald Reagan appointing him to a U.S. attorney, back in the 80s to try to retain some sort of conservative bona fides. But if you go back to just 2008, before he had nothing to do with Arkansas at that time, and he's endorsing Eric Holder, who, again, is one of the most controversial, if not the most controversial, attorney generals in American history. He set race relations back in this country by 30 years. He was, he was not impartial by any stretch of the imagination. Remember when you had people that were just trying to change voting laws, going from partisan elections to nonpartisan, and he would go in and say, no, you're racist. You're a racist state for going to nonpartisan elections, which was actually insulting upon the African-American community, because the implication was that, you can't remember somebody's name when you go to vote for them. Only thing you can remember is vote for the D or the R. I mean, he set race relations back in this country 30 years. And obviously Barack Obama did too with the bully pulpit and everything else. We've got to go to break. Amazing contrast. I hope you've enjoyed this content. Rampant injustice. Jan Morgan, a great job in 2012 exposing the military Gestapo tactics of Eric Holder's Justice Department. In 2008, Asa Hutchinson endorsed Eric Holder to be the Attorney General. Boy, what a mistake that was. Back in just a moment.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So again, some of you wanting to watch this documentary or this investigative piece that we just played this hour for yourselves. So I just posted it right there on the Facebook feed. You can watch us on Facebook, facebook.com/Conduit News. Enjoying the audience. Really appreciate you guys and all the comments that you guys have out there for us. You can also watch us at conduitnews.com, but it's a little less interactive because of it's not the Facebook video, it's the live stream video. Yeah, I appreciate all you guys, and let me give some shout outs here. Amy on Facebook writing that this is intimidation in the sincerest form. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Oh, this is because Tim. Hey, yeah, Tim, I did not. I got your sarcasm. Okay, I definitely got your sarcasm. Everybody got your sarcasm. Tim called me a liar, but he was being sarcastic. So, anyway, it's a pretty funny post. Gene McVeigh. Gene, hello, thanks for listening. He's writing, Asa Hutchinson's wingman exposes what they think about born-again Christian women in Arkansas. State Senator and Pastor Jason Rapert has taken political campaigning to a new level by calling Jan Morgan a Jezebel. Since Asa Hutchinson has remained silent, he must agree with his attack dog. That's Gene McVeigh, Republican pioneer, writing that on Conduit News Facebook feed right now. Folks, we have got to go to break. We have one more hour coming your way next, and when we come back, I want to introduce you to a group called Empower Texans and the president and CEO of Empower Texans, Michael Quinn Sullivan. What can we as Arkansans learn from Empower Texans? I'll have that for you when we come back.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. It's pretty much an attack machine on what I'm trying to accomplish in this state, and their message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Memo. It's important to know that, if that were false, if we had done, put bad information out there, the media would be still harping on it.
Mm-hmm.
That memo issue has gone away. Then we're moving on to the next issue. Now, even our findings and recommendations that are coming out on the Russia investigation that the House Intel Committee just recently concluded, you haven't heard much about that either. And there was big furor over, they're shutting down the investigation too soon, and how can we do this? Well, you haven't heard much about that either. So you'll, in the next, week or so, that's all been submitted to the intelligence community for declassification.
Okay.
It'll come out, be made public, and there will be a minority view addendum, but they'll all come out as a single document. The findings, recommendations, and then the minority view, and see for yourself. Make the assessment on your own. I'm not going to try and bias you or anything like that. And then we'll talk again when you've had a chance to review all that.
Okay.
And I would encourage you to do it. It'll be out there online in public space, and you'll be able to pull it and look at it, and you will be absolutely amazed when you read it.
Okay, I'm now intrigued. I can't wait. That's sounds awesome. Because I just feel like, I just know the media is what they're doing is they're certainly putting out something that I don't believe is factual when it comes to this whole Russia investigation and everything else. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, Congressman Rick Crawford. Sure. Can we talk about the tariff situation that's kind of been going on with China? And there's probably some Arkansas farmers out there listening, and they probably kind of want to know what your thoughts are on that.
I hope there are a lot of farmers listening right now, because I don't know that look, there's a whole lot of farmers that have my cell phone number, and when there's problems and they want to call, they got an issue, they call me, and I make myself available to my constituents, and I want them to know this, that this goes back to the look past the personality and the rhetoric and focus in on the numbers. The numbers are on our side. Now, I will say this, in the rhetoric that ensued immediately after the announcement of the tariffs, the Chinese are announcing they're going to retaliate X, Y, and Z and all this other kind of stuff, and you look at what's happening with the soybean market. So the soybean market reacts and starts to go down. I can't prove this, but common sense dictates, and based on the past behavior of China, you can probably assume that they shorted soybeans before they started the economic saber rattling.
Okay.
So they shorted the soybean market. That's number one. Run the price down through this process, and when it finds the bottom, then they buy up in cash. So good deal for China. Okay, so we again, this really kind of underlies the whole point of what Trump is making, is that they manipulate, they don't play by the rules, they utilize their status as a developing economy as they're recognized by the WTO, which absolutely is completely unfounded. They are not a developing economy. They are a very developed and aggressively growing economy, and in fact a belligerent actor in the economy.
Yeah.
And so they shouldn't have that kind of status. But when they get that status, they get to play by a different set of rules. And so that's one thing to consider. It's been going on for 20-plus years. So all these things have to happen to get right. But in the short term, is this going to affect Arkansas farmers? It might to some degree, but by the time we get to harvest, you look at what's going on right now. Chinese have a huge demand for soybeans and corn. They've got to buy it somewhere. Argentina's having a crop failure for all intent and purpose, major drought. They can't rely on Argentina to fill the orders and to meet their demand. So the soybeans are going to come from somewhere else. So in a manner of speaking, these commodities like soybeans and corn, to a large degree, are what you might call fungible, in that in the marketplace, they're going to move around. They're going to go where they need to go.
Say, hey,
so we might not necessarily
Michael,
have to directly sell our soybeans to China with a 25% tariff tacked on it. That's not even going to happen. But if it did, we could just transship through Argentina and other countries, just like they've been doing with steel. So, the point I'm trying to make is,
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us today. This is Conduit News Radio, and I just want to take the time to introduce you to Michael Quinn Sullivan. He's on the line with us. I actually think we have video of him. He's a fifth-generation Texan. He is the president and CEO of Empower Texans. Michael, welcome to Conduit News Radio. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, Paul, great. Thanks. I appreciate the chance to be with you today.
There we go. Hang on one second. I think we're having trouble getting you, Michael. Can you hear us?
I can hear you just fine.
There we go. We have you. We have you on the program now. All right. So it says here I'm reading from Empower Texans website. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram said Sullivan slays taxpayer dragons in Austin. When the heat is on in Austin, Michael Quinn Sullivan knows how to make it even hotter. Texas Monthly dubbed him the enforcer on their list of the 25 most influential Texans. The Dallas Morning News has called him the state's most influential unelected Republican. How do you respond to that? Those are very big compliments, in my opinion, sir.
They're either compliments or they're kind of the old saying, those whom the gods seek to destroy, they first praise. I think that it's always nice when your enemies want to talk about how powerful you are. What I tell my staff is, when people are complaining that we're too big, too powerful, just shut up and let them finish speaking. Is kind of our approach.
Yeah. I think that's a really good. Can you tell us a little bit about your organization, Empower Texans, and what you guys hope to accomplish? I see some great things here. On the About page, the greatest threat to our state's economic growth and competitiveness is the weight of government on the economy. I completely agree.
Yeah. So our organization takes the tact that most of government is improved when we have more people involved and more people engaged. And unfortunately, a whole lot of our modern system of government, listening to the intro a second ago with Ronald Reagan talking about having a place for self-governance, that's absolutely true. The United States, the state of Texas, the state of Arkansas, we were all designed to be these laboratories of experimentation on the simple question, can people govern themselves and not by some distant ruler, as Reagan put it? That remains to be as true today as it was in the 1980s, as in the 1780s. And at Empower Texans, we seek to try to amplify that, to make that more real. Whether you're talking about cronyism, where it's a very small number of legislators and bureaucrats who decide what rich corporation from somewhere else is going to get your money. That doesn't happen when you have a lot of people watching. Those kind of decisions only happen in the back rooms. You just go down the line of all the decisions, all the bad decisions that are made in government. Those get improved when you have more citizens involved in paying attention. So that's what we try to do. We try to give citizens more opportunities to see what their government is doing and to participate in government at the federal level a little bit, but much more importantly at those levels of government that are more impactful to citizens, which is at the state and the local level. You know, as conservatives, I get so frustrated when I know that most of my conservative friends can tell you the names of prime ministers of countries that, you know, I couldn't find on a map if you paid me. But yet they don't know who their city council members are, their school board members are, their county sheriff. And those are people who can really impact your life. We need to be bringing our principles to bear at all levels of government, not just the sexy ones that get you on Fox News.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We're talking with Michael Quinn Sullivan. The organization is Empower Texans. You can go to empowertexans.com and find out more about this great organization. This is kind of part of a series, Michael. We've talked to people who run organizations in Pennsylvania, in Virginia, and now we're looking at Texas. And we're trying to do this as a way to encourage the grassroots activists here in Arkansas, because we are a big government state, even though we've just kind of gone, to the Republican side of things. So I would ask you what I've asked them. What about the backlash that you guys get when you guys try to educate the citizenry about maybe somebody who claims to be a limited government conservative? What kind of backlash can you get when their voting record doesn't match their campaign rhetoric?
Oh, it's glorious when those folks react, because it's never good. I've had private investigators tail my children. We've had death threats. We've had people threaten, calling up donors and threatening them, people, or at least people they think are donors. So these guys all respond the way the emperor responded when the kid said, "Hey, you're not wearing any clothes." But that's the challenge: is finding folks, and I'm very blessed to have a fantastic staff and fantastic donor base who are committed to exposing the delta between what politicians say at home and what they do when they're in office. Ideally, there is no sunlight between what is said and what is done. But unfortunately, and it seems to be particularly on the Republican side, where we see these guys who want to campaign as the second coming of Ronald Reagan, and yet when they get into office, they legislate like Walter Mondale. We have to put a stop to that. It's not fair to the voter. The voters are being lied to, and again, they don't respond well. The elected officials don't respond well. We try to keep things focused entirely on the objective voting record and say, look, here's how they voted. Explain the vote. Well, it's often funny. The politician will turn to, oh, no, don't look at my voting record. Look at the things that I've done. I've coached Little League. I've, mow my lawn nicely, whatever all it might be. They don't want to talk about their voting records, which is what tells us we need to talk a lot more even about their voting records.
No, that's exactly right. We're talking with Michael Quinn Sullivan. Again, it's Empower Texans. Now, he's a former newspaper reporter. And I'd love for you to tell us about your experience and how does that shape what you do in Texas, but also a Capitol Hill staffer, you a think tank vice president, also an Eagle Scout, a graduate from Texas A&M University. And so tell us.
Which may not get me any love in Arkansas, depending on where we are in the calendar.
Yeah, of course not. But still, it is a great university. And so tell us just a little bit about, what you've seen in D.C. And a lot of times what we get here locally is, Arkansas is a small state. We're not like Washington, D.C. In fact, we're exactly like Washington, D.C. And it's almost worse because less people know about it. Like you said, the sexy Fox News issues versus, knowing your city councilor, or knowing your state rep or your state senator and what the issues are.
Yeah, look, we Texans excel at marketing. We have marketed our state better than anyone else. We are the conservative nirvana. We are the Take your favorite adjective and apply it to something good about conservatism, and that's what we in Texas say we are. And I would suggest that a lot of what we have done as Texans, we have marketed ourselves as this conservative, and in some ways we've kind of deceived ourselves into believing that we're this very conservative state. And yet, when you peel back just the veneer of the marketing brochure, we've got a lot of problems in our government, both the state and local levels. Texas has the 4th highest debt per capita in the nation. We have in the top 15% property tax burdens. So the idea that Texas is somehow doing things right and DC is doing things wrong is a misnomer, because they're both doing a lot of things wrong. They're just doing different things wrong, I guess. When I talk about where we are as Texans, we are often kind of like the guy who's the least drunk guy at the bar, but yet wants to be held up as a model of sobriety. Texans should not be content with simply being better off than California or looking better than Louisiana. I mean, I think Arkansas and Texas can both agree it's not hard to look better than Louisiana many days.
This is true.
I'm going to get my Cajun friends are going to be very upset with me. But that's how we end up talking about ourselves. And that's not right. I mean, we should be talking about ourselves in the way, way Mom said to talk about yourself. Are you doing the best you can do? Are you the best you can be? Those are the measures that we should be striving for, not just, going to bed each night praying that Jerry Brown continues to drive California off the cliff. When we look at Washington, D.C., a lot of things that we're looking at there is how much is our congressional delegation working to free Texas from onerous regulations? How much are they working to let Texans govern Texas? That's kind of the we approach looking at the federal government, and then ask questions of our legislators. Hey, are you going to be able to govern Texas? When you don't have the excuse of the EPA and Obama IRS employees, or whatever the excuse du jour is, are you going to man up and do what you promised to do when you were campaigning? That becomes the tension.
Yeah, it's encouraging that we have other states that are having the same problems that we're having. I want to ask you, though, about people moving to Texas and not changing their voting habits. They're moving to Texas because it's prosperous, okay? We have this a little bit in northwest Arkansas. We have Bentonville, which is the global headquarters for Walmart, and so it attracts a lot of people from a lot of areas who have, quite frankly, maybe more liberal, bigger government tendencies, and you can kind of start to see things change there. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on people moving to Texas, because it is more prosperous than maybe northern states, but are they going to realize why the states they left, or because they were voting for people who just wanted more and more government?
Yeah, so I put on my cheating reading glasses here, because I literally just printed off a report this morning from the Dallas Federal Reserve, and it's actually a pretty fascinating report called "Gone to Texas: Migration Vital to Growth in the Lone Star State." I was trying to find a chart that had a little bit of what you're pointing to, but can't find it fast enough. But when we're looking at the inflow, what we're finding is probably half of the people who are moving here get it. They understand that they left California. They were.
So we got a freeze. I think we've lost a connection with Michael a little bit. Let's see. I don't know if we can get him back or not. It may kind of come back here in just a moment, Michael. So if you can still hear us, if you'll just hang back, and we'll let you finish your thought there. But fascinating interview, folks. It's Empower Texans. That's the organization. EmpowerTexans.com. The reason we wanted to highlight and have Mr. Sullivan on is, we've had other people on from other states that are involved in similar work that Conduit is involved in, And so when you see these Republican politicians get upset, you hear in most all of these states that we talk to, what they do is they try to go after donors. We've had
coming
the
from California or New York.
Are we back? Are we back? Okay, Michael, can you hear me? We lost you in mid-sentence talking about.
Then you lost me at probably the right time to lose me.
No, okay. Well, so we'll kind of wrap things up here, and I apologize, but just what would you say to the grassroots out there in Arkansas who can get kind of discouraged because of the lack of change, and people have been voting for conservatism for a long time in Arkansas, it seems now, and yet we keep getting excuses as to why limited government can't work. What would you say to all those folks out there listening?
Well, first, buck up. It's not as bad as it could be. Two, that should be your excuse to being more engaged. Just because things haven't changed yet, just because things have been fixed yet, doesn't mean they're not going to be. We didn't get into our problems overnight, and we're not going to get out of them overnight. We have to be committed as conservatives to the long game. We have to be my parents' generation, the flower children, down with the struggle or whatever. We have to do likewise. We have to be willing to keep fighting, to keep pressing on. Texas needs a strong Arkansas. Arkansas needs a strong Texas. The competition there. We shouldn't be in a race to the bottom. We should be in a race to see who can, have the greatest expression of self-governance, who can have the greatest amounts of liberty. None of us should think of ourselves as living on islands. We can steal best practices from each other. I think what Conduit for Action is doing is my team and I've been reading up on all the stuff you guys have been doing. And there are things y'all are doing that we need to import, and vice versa. But that's where we need to develop that community, that sense of we're all in this fight together. The other side does that. The other side has that esprit de corps. And that's why I think that we sometimes feel like they're winning and we're not. In fact, we've got the truth on our side. We're not called to be successful. We're called to be faithful. And I would suggest to you that there is no better political cause to be faithful to than the cause of liberty and self-governance.
Wow, that's very well put. Michael Quinn Sullivan, I appreciate it, sir. Thanks so much for coming on the program. It's great to meet you, and I'd love to do this again soon. I'd love to be able to use your wisdom. Yes, thank you, sir. Be safe. Have a great morning. Folks, we're going to take a break. The website, again, empowertexans.com. Check them out. They are doing a lot of work all their work's great, but they're doing a lot of things that we're trying to do here in Arkansas, exposing the truth, holding people accountable. We got to take a break, folks. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
Money, power, prestige, essence, available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From Zenata Rhino Collection, the fragrance of backroom deals. Nepotism. The aroma of higher taxes. Subliminal. Deception. Deep state. Ace. Made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Coming up at 7:33, we got Mr. Josh Waters. He'll be calling in, and we will have a John Woods trial update. He has a ton of notes. He's been writing feverishly. Now, if you want to know, so the judge in this case, I think Tim Brooks, in this John Woods public corruption case, he stole taxpayer money. He's a Republican. He's part of the good old boy system here in the state. And it's just, the stuff that we're finding out now, there's a shingle company involved that people had interest in. We found out on Friday that they tried to pass a medical marijuana amendment that would have set up a fund that would have funneled money directly to this Christian school, Ecclesia College. Just really a lot of stuff embarrassing, laid bare. And it's going to be hard to get some of these documents. A lot of these documents, after the court's over, we're told are going to be under seal. I'm going to talk to Attorney Josh Waters about that coming up in terms of what that means. In many ways, the only way for us to get this information is to have somebody in the courtroom reporting on it. You can't use your phone. You can't have a recorder. So Josh Waters is in the courtroom daily, and he is just feverishly taking notes. I understand Doug Thompson, who's the Arkansas Democrat Gazette reporter they have on this story, he had to get like a court order just to be able to type on his laptop, is what I'm told. And so there are some that get to type on the laptop, but Josh Waters is doing it. Doing it by hand. So we're going to talk to him at 7:33 coming up here in just a moment. He just posted on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Conduit News. Looking forward to being on in a few minutes to give an update on the John Woods trial. It's going to be, I think, a lengthy interview because he's got a lot of ground to cover. It's been several days since we've talked about him. In our first hour of the program today, we did a contrast. If you missed the first hour, please go get it. Video archives, podcast, iTunes, SoundCloud, whatever you want. Here in about 30 minutes, it'll be available, hour one, on the Facebook page once our broadcast ends. It's already available in audio-only format, but don't go do that yet. Just wait till this hour's over, and then you can go get it and get the video. Stick with us because you're going to want to see this, hear this John Woods update. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, in the first hour, what we talked about was Asa Hutchinson's endorsement of Eric Holder in 2008 versus Jan Morgan in 2012, what she did. Making a documentary exposing the Gestapo-like tactics of the Eric Holder Justice Department on Arkansas small business for alleged white-collar crimes. They'd send a SWAT team in and everything else, intimidation tactics. It's really heartbreaking when you look at how some of these reputations have been damaged and everything else. So we talked about that in the first hour, and you've just got to check it out. You got to check it out. So if you're one of these people that don't start driving until 7:30 or don't start driving until 7, right, when you get to your desk at work, okay, when the boss isn't looking, just go to conduitnews.com and click on video archives and watch the program. Watch that first hour, or go to facebook.com/Conduit News. If the first time you've been there, give us a like. Make sure that you turn your notifications on. And while you're at it, go to YouTube and subscribe to Conduit News on YouTube. It's free, and you'll get our smaller videos, and you'll be able to kind of tell. Here's a hint. So sometimes we make smaller videos, not just of the broadcast, but, we found that one clip of Asa Hutchinson saying he wanted to eliminate the grocery tax in 2006. And see, that was uploaded publicly before there was any story written about it or anything else. So you can kind of feel out where the narrative's going. You know what I'm saying? We want you guys to have the information. Here at Conduit News, we want you to know that we want you guys to have the information because we know you're getting it out to everybody in your sphere of influence. And we're going to take a break and be back in just a moment.
They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. It's pretty much an attack machine on what I'm trying to accomplish in this state, and their message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Soybeans are going to find their way into the marketplace to fill the demand in the marketplace. And this is a short-term blip whereby the Chinese are doing everything they can to their own gain to take effect or take advantage of a market, a short-term market advantage, if you will, that they created.
Yeah.
So none of the fundamentals have changed. They have to consume our soybeans.
Yeah.
They just don't have the resources themselves. They've got 1.4 billion population, an increased livestock sector placing more demand on their need for corn and soybeans. So, I hope farmers will, and I know they do. And the reason I know that they recognize this because I haven't been getting any calls.
Okay, so they understand, and
they absolutely. Farmers are smart.
Yes, they are. And, hey, do you think people are kind of excited though? I mean that the Trump administration. I mean, I know economic saber rattling. I like that term, by the way. But that there's somebody trying to be proactive to stop China from manipulating the way they are doing things. That this is kind of a necessary. This is a necessary action that the president's taking.
Oh, we're all engaged in that. In fact, the president, he's got a new economic advisor in Larry Kudlow, his trade representative, Lighthizer. Everybody that's involved in trade and in this global economic cadre that he has, they're all involved in that, trying to hold their feet to the fire and recognize that China has got to be held to account if they're going to continue to be considered a developing economy. Then it's going to put everybody else at a disadvantage. The good news is countries like in the European Union, Great Britain, Japan, Korea, others in the Pacific Rim, Australia, New Zealand, they all understand that the Chinese have been manipulating, continue to manipulate. They float their currency, they cheat, and take advantage of people. They all recognize this. So we have a huge coalition, economic coalition, that will address this, I think, aggressively to prevent China from continuing to cheat the way they do.
And then I saw where, after the tariff thing came out,
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, what do you need to know about public corruption in Arkansas? This is what we've got. Josh Waters on the line with us. Josh Waters is with Political Strategies, and if Joe will get off the phone with him and stop talking to him and actually put him in, it must be really important. It must be really important. Well, come on, we got to get to this John Woods interview. Come on, hurry here, put him in. All right, we have Josh Waters. Now we have Josh Waters with us from Political Strategies. Josh, give us our John Woods update. It's been several days in court, and what's been going on?
Well, good morning, Paul. Really a lot has really happened, and I think the case is really swayed, if I'm honest. between last Wednesday and today. I kind of have a timeline here and a bunch of notes, and just wanted to kind of go chronologically back from Thursday. I think was the last day we hadn't talked about. And so when we go back to last Thursday, they finished up with the witness, Mr. Mike Novak. And, Mr. Novak was the custodian of records of all the emails at Ecclesia College. So a lot of the contact between Warren Parris, who is now cooperating with the government, has pleaded guilty in this, a lot of those emails, maybe all of them, came in as evidence. And so they went back through and rehashed a lot of those emails with Mr. Novak. Then he finished up on Thursday, and one of the next witnesses was Dr. Nackerman Williams. And Dr. Williams went and testified. He's from the Walton Family Foundation, and he went and testified about his visit to Ecclesia College. The defense's theory and argument was Randall Shelton was actually a consultant, and he tried to set up these meetings. He tried to get big donors to look into Ecclesia. Well, Dr. Nackerman Williams actually testified that he was contacted by former Representative Tim Summers, and that's who got him to Ecclesia College. He stated he didn't really know who Randall Shelton was, that he may have been there when he was there, but he honestly couldn't remember if he had been there or not. But that any of his decisions or going to the college to visit was not based on contact with Randall Shelton. Dr. Williams also testified that based on him seeing the college, knowing a little bit about it, he didn't think it was going to be financially sustainable whenever he went and viewed the college and all that they were needing to do.
So when approached to give private dollars to Ecclesia College, this guy from Walmart essentially is like, yeah, it doesn't look like this operation's financially viable.
Right, and he was nice about it. He just thought it wasn't a good fit, but also he didn't think it was very viable. The defense tried to push him and be like, well, if they were able to raise more money, wouldn't that take the conversation to the next level? He's like, it would, but it probably still wouldn't be a good fit. Because, when you think of the Walton Family Foundation, he talked about other times they've got involved with colleges, and they gave a $50 million gift for the naming rights of the Walton College there at the University of Arkansas. So they know the viability of programs, and they know what an investment something can be. And so I thought that was pretty powerful testimony from Dr. Williams.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And so we're talking about, by the way, folks, we're talking with Josh Waters. He has extensive notes about what's been going on in the public corruption trial of Senator John Woods. The crimes are, a lot of crimes, wire fraud, basically stealing taxpayer dollars and getting kickbacks, laundering the money. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. If you're just joining us, if you're just new to the program and you don't know, this is a big deal. It's really the heart of corruption in Arkansas, and it's there's a lot of tentacles here. So, Josh, essentially, our whiteboard for the rest of this week says deliberate lack of account. And what that's meant to describe is it's kind of building off of a Northwest Arkansas Democrat editorial where they basically said that there was a purposeful attempt with these planning and development districts to just basically just be a formality. But it was a purpose attempt to set up lack of accountability for where this money goes. It is coming from the legislators. They're the ones that are directing where it goes, but they're able to launder it. And I think there's some, where we have money laundering accusations of running this through a college, then a consultant, and then back to the legislators. That's not a coincidence, considering that the money itself is laundered through planning and development districts to get around a Supreme Court ruling.
Yes, that's a very good point. That's basically why they did it the way they did, was to try to get away around the Supreme Court ruling. That was alluded to. Actually, the defense has tried to argue, and I think very unsuccessfully, that these planning and development districts and these boards actually had the final approval, and, the legislators were just recommending this. There's been, a lot of evidence, a lot of testimony showing that that was really just a farce. That they apply for or don't apply at all and are still awarded hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, that was
that
a big
one.
one.
$50,000 grant.
Yeah.
And then they missed the deadline and all that. So there's enough evidence, I think, for this jury to understand the system they had set up was really just a charade.
I don't know where you are in your notes, but can you tell us about the shingle company, and tell us, because that's a new thing we haven't discussed here.
Yes, that was Mr. Robert Palmer testified on Friday of last week, and he's probably my favorite witness. If I'm going to be honest, he's a very charming guy and very charismatic. Kind of really came across well, but I think he was probably very helpful for the prosecution's case. Though Mr. Robert Palmer is the man who has set up this technology or invented this technology to try to recycle these shingles to get the asphalt and concrete out so that they can reuse, and whatever the uses are for that wasn't super clear. But what they did with Mr. Palmer is they went through kind of the timeline of John Wood's involvement, Randall Shelton's involvement, and Orrin Paris's involvement in this shingle resource and recycling company. And Paul, at the end of the day, the current operating agreement for that company, John Woods is not technically has a membership interest. But what the prosecution did is they looked back at other drafts of these operating agreements. And that kind of goes back to your point, what you mentioned earlier on the show was these documents will actually be sealed, these operating agreements, because of some proprietary information in there. And so really the only way to get this information is being there in the courtroom. And so when we look at these operating agreements going back, John Woods' name and membership interest was involved in two of the drafts before the final draft. And then what they showed was there's actually text messages Senator John Woods was calling for meetings of this company. And so I think the prosecution's, their theory was they had this shingle and recycling company together, and John Woods on paper wasn't a member, but he was actively involved. They showed texts of them meeting, them discussing the company. And Paul, at the very end of Mr. Palmer's testimony was actually probably some of the more powerful testimony in the case. It was actually the defense counsel who got more into it. The prosecution put on a bill. It was Act 441 of 2015, and it was an ADEQ appropriation of JIF money for $250,000. And what it would go towards is this shingle and recycling company for startup costs for that. And so the way Mr. Palmer characterized it, he was very honest. He said, oh, yeah, that was what, John Woods was trying to help us get funding with. That's what that bill was about. And so when defense came back and was cross-examining him, the attorney for Shelton, was kind of pushing, well, that's not really what it is, right? And he read through it, and he's like, oh, you're right. He said he mischaracterized it, but that this was just a bid process that they would have to go to. And so she's like, so anyone could have applied for this. And Paul, his response, I think, just closed it, closed out his testimony. There's no more questions. He said, we are the only people in the world that can do this. This is technically a bid process, but we're the only ones who can do this. And so, again, a complete sham, using of taxpayer money to wreck to a company that Senator Woods was involved in. Maybe not on paper, but clear through the text messages and their involvement.
Wow.
And he was trying to funnel public money to that under the guise of a grant, but knowing they're the only ones who could even have the technology required for that grant.
To his own company. I mean, it's just, that's just lazy is what that is. At least this other scheme was a little bit more complicated. But yeah, so that does sound interesting. I read somewhere where it was exposed yesterday, and again, continue in your notes, whatever we need to know, but John Wood's fiance got a job at Ecclesia, is that correct?
Not at Ecclesia. She got a job at Alternative Opportunities, what's now Preferred Family Healthcare.
The Rusty Cranford
hired her.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Rusty Cranford hired her, and that's actually about where they ended yesterday. The HR representative from What is now Preferred Family was Alternative Opportunities, doing business as Dayspring, doing business as Decision Point, where some of this JIF money, they tried to funnel it to there as well. And so I think that's probably more of what we'll see today is more of Rusty Cranford's involvement in this. And I imagine that's what we'll see today, and there'll be probably some contentious debate between the attorneys of what can come in through some emails. They alluded to that yesterday. So that's what we can expect today and what ended yesterday. But on Friday, what we then got, Paul, was well, if I can go back, because it did come out in Mr. Palmer's testimony that he actually lives on an Ecclesia College property, the same address that was registered to Randall Shelton as the registered agent of this company. And he said that they both lived there together. And so, and the plant of this company was, he referred to it as the Pratt Place, and that was actually a property that was, described in some detail in trying to get some of this GIF money, was to get this Pratt Place, and it was billed as student dorms and staff housing. But Mr. Palmer's testimony alluded to that. Well, that was really going to be to run this shingle company, or get that shingle company off the ground.
Okay. Where's Pratt Place located? Do you know?
It's on the campus of Ecclesia College.
Okay.
It's owned by them.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, a matter of fact, I'm almost positive that so is that in because I attended a wedding at a Pratt Place at one time. I mean, I know I did. I just don't know if it's the same time. I know it was in Northwest Arkansas, so it's interesting. I'll have to figure that one out myself. Gosh, it just seems like there's so many tentacles here. I mean, are you surprised at all, Josh, about how everything is, coming out in court? And talk a little bit more about the fact that all this stuff is going to be sealed. I mean, I would imagine that these text messages have been very useful to the government's prosecution of this case, but there's also, correct me if I'm wrong, they also have emails between Bureau of Legislative Research staff and legislators that the government has, but we're not ever going to get to look at any of that stuff, right?
That's right. Those are considered working papers of the legislators, and they are exempt under FOIA. I think Mr. McCutcheon was on a few weeks ago saying he's going to push to try to make to where that information is FOIAble. And I think after this case that's going on, it absolutely should be, because what was protected there that came out, Paul, was through Mr. Matthew Miller was testifying, and they had several emails going back. And what came out was that John Woods was working with David Couch, the author of the Medical Marijuana Amendment, and they were getting drafts, and Mr. Woods approved Mr. Miller to work with him, directly. And that's not allowed unless the legislator authorizes it. To work with him directly and help draft language for the medical marijuana agreement. And it came out in testimony that this was actually, they didn't really maybe intend to file anything through the legislature, but they were trying to use BLR staff and resources to draft this medical marijuana amendment that they were going to use through the ballot initiative process. And so these emails and communications are not subject to FOIA, but they're coming out in open public court. And so that's why we have some of that information now, is because they came out in open court at the end of last week.
So do they provide documents for the people in court, or is it just you have to rely on your your memory and you writing all this stuff down?
You can't. They don't have documents to give out, but what they do is they have big screens right there in, where the public sits, and so everything's displayed up on the screen, and you can it's fair game to write down and to get. That was BLR ended, and then Friday started what I would consider, if I'm honest, that kind of the nail in the coffin for Senator Woods and Mr. Shelton. Special Agent John Munn was the next witness on Friday. He's with the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit. He was a civil auditor for the IRS. And Paul, he went down in detail through this PowerPoint of when calls and emails were sent, when money was sent from the planning and development districts, when it got to Ecclesia, when Ecclesia then deposited it, when Ecclesia then re-upped their, consulting agreement with Mr. Shelton and Paradigm Strategies, when Mr. Shelton deposited the money, when the money was then withdrawn in cash, and when, cash deposits were made, within a minute at the same branch into Senator John Woods' bank account. I mean, it was just bam, bam, bam. And, the jury, they heard almost a full day of testimony of these transactions going forward and text messages in the process about talking about meetings, talking about getting other legislators to direct money. And so it was really, if I'm honest, they tried to come back yesterday and poke some holes in it. I don't think they're very successful at all. But, that's so important, though, Paul, because a lot of that information that came out in that timeline may have been information that was in the indictment or that's known publicly. But unless this information gets into evidence, unless the jury hears it through testimony or it comes in through evidence, they cannot consider that. And so that's why I thought Friday and really yesterday as well was so important for the prosecution to get all this in. They had expert testimony on wire fraud and how they could prove that it was moving through interstate commerce while it's a federal case. So I thought that was very powerful testimony Friday and Monday. It's the detailed timeline they gave showing the flow of this money from, beginning point, the taxpayer, into Randall Shelton and John Woods' bank account. They tried to argue for Senator Woods that, he cashed his per diem payment on the second floor of the Capitol, and that's why he had all this cash and was depositing it. But, like I said, there is one instance where Randall Shelton depositing with your cash, and at the same branch at almost the exact same time, there's cash deposits into Senator Woods' account.
So, that all does look pretty conclusive. We're talking with Josh Waters, an attorney with Political Strategies. He's covering the John Woods case. He's in the courtroom taking notes. Josh, you seem to think that the government's case is just really getting stronger, and the cross-examination of witnesses by the defense isn't going so well. Maybe they try to make some points. But I guess my question to you is, how do you think the jury, and this is a very subjective question, so I apologize, but how do you think the jury's receiving it? In your opinion, you're in the courtroom. Is there a chance, and I know there is always a chance, but what's the likelihood that there's some technicality or there's some way where, I guess John Woods and Randall Shelton beat the rap? Do you think that's going to happen?
Ooh, Paul, I was thinking about that last night. I think it's really hard to say. I think at this point, if that happens, if they somehow get off, it's going to have to be something big that probably comes out from the defense side that really casts doubt in the jury's mind. It's really hard to read the jury. You try to look and see. Most of them are pretty measured. Now, when they take notes, that's always been interesting. And you can kind of get a sense of, what they think is important. And so I would think the jury probably, I don't know. I'd hate to try to think what they're thinking, but I guess I would say if I was on the jury, it would seem pretty clear to me what's happened based on all the testimony. I think Orrin Parrish's testimony that's expected maybe as soon as this afternoon, probably tomorrow, that's going to go a long way. I thought Mike and Neal, the first day, his testimony, and through the process, it's just been a buildup. And I think that's been reflective of, the defense counsel's tactics. The attorney for John Woods has asked for a couple of mistrials. On Friday, he was very adamant that his statement was, I don't feel safe driving to a 7-Eleven right now. He was so tired and they needed time to rest. And so outside of, something happening there with that kind of line of tactics.
What's John's? What is, for the most part, what is John Woods' body language at all? Do you pay attention to that at all?
Yes, he's very, measured, just, pretty still. very, attentive to the testimony and communicating with his attorney. And Mr. Shelton seems a little more engaged. I guess I would say he's kind of up and looking at the screens more and looking at the evidence that's coming in and communicating with his attorneys. And so that's kind of their body language based just on observation in the courtroom. One thing I did want to share, Paul, that came out yesterday that was pretty frustrating to me. There was some text messages between Mr. Orrin Paris and John Wood, and it was regarding the information that came out about them trying to direct medical marijuana tax money to the college, and it actually came out in the context of a meeting they had. Sorry, I'm flipping back through my notes here, but I have a direct quote, and they're talking about how using the medical marijuana money might be seen as a bad thing, and
you mean between like Orrin Paris is saying like, hey, I don't necessarily know if we want to fund our university with taxes for medical marijuana, right? Because that was the law that was drafted. That's what they were planning on doing.
Yes. And so that's what came out, Paul, was that here it is. They're talking about what you just said, using the money. And what Mr. Paris's response was is that, I'm opposed to the medical marijuana, but we can use money from the kingdom of evil and from Satan to use for the kingdom of God. And
so he was on board with it.
Pin drop.
So
yes, very much.
And
so.
You said you could. I'm sorry. You said you could hear a pin drop when when they read those text messages.
Yes, I mean it was just kind of like no one audibly was like but it was kind of that cringy feeling that you would get when you would hear something like that.
Yeah.
It was that was pretty upsetting.
Yeah. Wow. Josh Waters, I appreciate it. Just keep up the good work. I'd love to talk to you later in the week about what's going on, and let us know if we need to have you on tomorrow. If something happens today, just please let us know. We'd love to do it, and be safe out there, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. Have a great one.
All righty, folks. Good morning to you. We got to take a break.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, that about wraps things up for us here. We got to end the program. Want to thank Josh Waters for coming on. Want to thank Empower Texans CEO and President Michael Quinn Sullivan for coming on and sharing his wisdom. Also, I really want to thank Jan Morgan for doing that documentary back in 2012 we highlighted in the first hour about the abuses of the Eric Holder Justice Department. Check out that first hour if you want some information that nobody's really talking about, because people forget that Governor Asa Hutchinson endorsed Attorney General Eric Holder when Obama nominated him. So we compared that versus what his Justice Department did and how they set race relations back 30 years in this country, meaning Obama and Holder. All right, so that's all the time we have. Get this broadcast over at Conduit News, or go right now to Facebook.com/Conduit News. Like us on or follow us on YouTube as well. Subscribe to us on YouTube and get notifications. Folks, Arkansas, thanks for listening. Be safe.